So I've got some exciting news. I've got a brand new project. And you might be able to tell as it's behind me, it's not another BMW E30. And in fact, it only has 2 wheels. This thing's newer than any vehicle I've ever owned, yet it's still a project. It's a 2010 Ducati Multistrada. Now I know what you're thinking. This bike is too new to be a project, right? Well, actually, no. The 2010 model year was the first year for this body style and the high horsepower dual overhead cam 1200 engine that's in it, and these are way more technologically advanced than the ones that came before them. And because of that extra technology that's stuffed into this thing, the first few years had some growing pains, and the 2010 is the worst of all of them. Now, surprisingly enough, this bike runs just fine, but that isn't to say it isn't in need of a lot of work. So some things that are known to go wrong with the 2010s are these cylinder heads. They're known to have some porous cylinder heads where coolant gets into the combustion chamber and you start seeing smoke. I am thankful to say that this bike does not have that problem either now or ever, because it has 30,000 miles. It doesn't smoke or anything, doesn't lose any coolant. So I assume if it has 30,000 miles, it's either been taken care of at some point, or this is just one of the good ones. Another thing that usually goes wrong on these bikes is the instrument cluster. This was in the beginning when Ducati was introducing these large LCDs, and occasionally they would just go out and you'd have to get them replaced. And if you're under warranty, that was good because these are not cheap. Otherwise, you'd be in a ton of pain and looking at $1,000 or more to replace that. Lucky to say that one's working well. But why is this a project? Kind of skirting around that. Well, it is in need of the famous Ducati Desmo valve adjustment. It's not a walk in the park, that's for sure. But I am happy to say I have done it before on my Ducati 996 that I used to have, so I'm not that worried about it. But it is a new engine, new style engine that I haven't worked on before, so there will be some learning curve there. So again, this bike has 30,000 miles, and it lets you know when you're due for this Desmo service. Right there, it's saying 30,000 miles. It's due every 15,000, so this is the second iteration of valve adjustments that are due right now. And that's in fact why the bike came up for sale and why it came up for sale for such a good price. So if you were to take this to Ducati and ask them, hey, how much is it going to cost to get that done? They would quote you in the neighborhood of $1,500 to $2,000. So usually when these bikes come up for sale, it's because they're getting close or have exceeded that valve adjustment interval. So I picked this bike up for, drum roll please, $4,000. 4,000 bucks. That's it. This is a ton of motorcycle for $4,000. This thing has 150 horsepower, 91 pound-feet of torque. I mean, this is literally a super bike engine stuffed into an upright, comfortable, practical motorcycle. And let me tell you, it is so quick. You would never know it's due for a valve adjustment. It runs perfectly. So, I mean, I am just over the moon with how this bike performs. I don't know why it took me so long to end up with one of these. These are such bargains on the used market. And like I said, for $4,000, you get a ton of motorcycle. Granted, this isn't the S model, so it doesn't have the Öhlins electronic adjustable suspension on it. But to be completely frank, that's just one less thing to go wrong. The standard suspension on these things is plenty fine for road use and the occasional track day. Yes, that's right, track day. I mean, you have Brembo brakes, a Sox rear shock, a Marzocchi front fork. You've got ABS and all these other features on this bike. And again, 150 horsepower. I mean, come on. You have that characteristic Ducati single-sided swing arm right there, which is this gorgeous rear three-quarter view. This bike comes equipped with standard with a slipper clutch, so definitely ready for the track. Again, the suspension's fully adjustable on this, so it's not electronically adjustable, but you have rebound and preload. So some of the other things, other than the obvious and large dilemma of needing a valve adjustment pretty much right out of the gate is that while you're doing the valve adjustment, you should also replace the timing belts. Not a huge deal because you got to take them off anyways to do the valves. So I'll be having to replace the timing belts while I'm in there. It definitely needs an oil change and an oil filter replacement. Not a big deal there, but you know, all these things start to add up. I don't know if you can tell on the video, but it needs a serious cleaning. So once I have everything off, I'm going to be getting in there with a bristle brush, some cleaner, and making this thing spotless. Because the owner I bought this from lived on a gravel road, and you can just see how it's kind of gross. Luckily, I think I caught it before it became really corroded, but some of the bolts have some surface rust on it, but mainly it's just caked on dirt and dust. So it'll be beautiful once it's done, but right now it looks pretty mangy, that's for sure. So going down the list of issues, other than the engine things we talked about, it needs fork seals. If you look right here, it has massive leaking going all the way down to the fork leg. In fact, when you sit it in the garage, it just has a little puddle on the ground if you leave it there a few days. Both forks are leaking. One is much worse than the other, as you can see right there. Pretty terrible. I'm not even sure how much fluid has leaked out. I don't know how long this fork's been leaking, but my guess it's been neglected for quite some time. So I'm not going to try and do the quick clean out the fork seal and just call it good. I am going to strip these forks down, replace the seals, and fill them back up with fresh fluid, because for 30,000 miles on it, it's time to do that anyways. So a fairly minor issue, but still an issue all the same, are the grips that are on this. They've been glued in place with what I can only equate to the nastiest boogers you'll ever see. And every time you grab them, you get them on your hands. I can't even believe someone would put something like this on there. It just makes the riding experience entirely miserable. So those will be going into the trash very soon. The clutch it works just fine, but it's kind of notchy. I think we just need to lubricate it up a little bit. But it does have a full hydraulic clutch system, a Brembo master cylinder here, so it's really high-end stuff throughout. Again, for $4,000 you get all of this stuff. It's pretty incredible. And then on the brakes we have Brembo calipers and master cylinder. Over here, I don't know what's going on here. It's got either a lot of air in the system or just really old fluid. I couldn't tell you, but I am going to have to get in there and see why, because the front brake, you can see I'm pulling it, nothing, pulling it, nothing, pulling it, nothing, pulling, nothing, and only till about right here, which is almost half the pull distance, do you actually get to your braking. And then when you get there, it's not very solid. So I know these brakes can be really great, and it just is going to take some TLC to figure out why they're not right now. Throttle cables need to be lubricated, probably adjusted a little bit too much play for my liking. If we pull it, you can kind of hear it just needs to be lubricated. It's a little squeaky. So getting back to some maintenance that's certainly never been done before is the coolant system. I'm going to be changing the coolant in it. It does require some special coolant that you can only get from the Ducati dealer. It's made by ENI and it comes in bags, and it's kind of this pink colored stuff. ENI Bike S coolant. So I'm going to be doing that as well. The chain needs a lot of attention. I think it's still fine. I don't see any tight links or anything like that. The sprocket looks okay, but man, this is just what happens when you live on a gravel road. It just starts to look really bad very quickly. You know, just look over here. The bolts have some nice rust on them, but it'll all clean up. I think it'll be really nice to see how it cleans up. It'll be a great difference between where we start and where we end up. The exhaust, it has the stock exhaust on there with a big catalytic converter box there. I'm gonna see if I can clean that up, polish it up so it looks nice and fresh. You can see that header pipe coming off the forward cylinder is gross looking. I have not even washed this bike yet. I just wanted to show it in its completely original state that I bought it. It's got bugs all over it. Luckily the tires are actually pretty good. I won't have to do anything there, so that's some expense saved right out of the gate. Again, this is one of Ducati's first higher tech motorcycles back in 2010. It came with a keyless ignition. So this is your key. I mean, it still does have a key, but it's just a transponder fob, and there's no place to even stick a key into. I mean, you have to stick the key in to get into the gas cap, But to turn the bike on, you just hold this button, and if the key is within range, you'll turn it on. You see you have this huge LCD display, not color, but that's fine. It tells you a lot of information. It's got riding modes, and honestly, I haven't even messed with it much. You can change various things. I'm not going to act like I know what I'm talking about here, because honestly, I've not looked into it. But pretty cool stuff. Hit the starting button here. And that big L-twin comes to life with no problem at all. Just listen to this thing. Woo! Yeah. So the most important part, the engine, is a peach. It really is. Surprisingly, the bodywork, I mean, this bike apparently has never been down. I mean, I don't see any evidence of scrapes anywhere or even being dropped off the side stand, so I'm really impressed. You know, it's just dirty. It just needs to be cleaned up, so I think I can really make a jewel out of this diamond in the rough. Something else I'm going to have to look into, and it's pretty well known for these first few years of Multistrada 1200s, is the rear brake is not very powerful. And I think a lot of that's due to just the orientation of the brake pedal. And this one might have some air in it, but you can see how far down it has to go before you actually get to the brake. I mean, if you look here, the brake switch initiates right there. So right there, your brake light's on, but you haven't started braking until you've gone all the way down here. By that point, you feel like you're not getting any rear brakes, so you just devote more to the front brake at that point, because, yeah, that's not good. So I'm going to have to look into that, see if I can figure out a way to make this work reliably and forever, because that's just not going to fly. So that's just a quick overview of the new project. I am just biting at the bullet to go ride this thing, but I know I shouldn't, because that valve adjustment really needs to be checked out, and those timing belts, well, they're definitely overdue, and at any point in time they could break, and that would be really terrible. So I'm going to get in there, replace those belts, go through all the maintenance before I go give this bike the beans, because I'm dying to get back on a bike that really has got some grunt. I really want to show that owning a Ducati, maintaining a Ducati isn't quite the nightmare it's been built up to be. So hopefully it'll inspire some of you to maybe think about taking on one of these Italian beauties. So until then, we'll see you guys next time.